What's up, everybody? It's Jordan from the Sports Behind Show. Today is March 22nd, 2022, and joining me today, I have a first-time guest. I have James Puopolo from Boda Sports. How you doing today, James?
Good, Jordan. Thank you so much for having me on, man. Really appreciate it.
Really glad you can be able to join the show today. It hasn't been a video in about a week or so, but out of town this past week. There's lots of NFL things to talk about. It seems like every single day there's a new trade in the NFL. And, obviously you're a big Cleveland Browns fan. That's why I had to have you on. The Browns, this past week, they traded for Deshaun Watson. Lots of people are excited about that. Some people aren't, obviously, with the allegations and everything. Cleveland, they received Deshaun Watson and a 6th-round pick in 2024. Houston, ended up receiving from the Browns all these draft picks, a 1st-round pick this year, next year, and the year after. A couple of 3rd and 4th round picks in there as well. So ended up having 6 total picks going to Houston to receive Deshaun Watson. So James, as a Cleveland Browns fan, what are your thoughts on Watson going to Cleveland?
So you alluded to it. It's a tough space because as a fan, I'm very excited that we just monumentally upgraded who we have under center. I was a big Baker Mayfield fan. I still am. I'm going to be rooting for him wherever he goes. The tough thing about that is you now have to connect that, I'm supporting it. I'm supporting the team, but you can't ignore what Deshaun Watson has allegedly done off the field. That's where it gets a little tough. I hope it all comes back as false, but after 22 odd cases, it's kind of hard to believe any of them will. I think the Browns organizations, when they were doing negotiations, said that they were going to put a lot of money into rehabbing his image, rehabbing who he is. We'll see how that all goes. We'll see how everything goes. I'm excited, though. This is, like I said, a huge upgrade going from a nobody quarterback to a top 5 quarterback.
And when you look at it, when you look at Baker Mayfield, in my opinion, I feel like Mayfield has been one of the most overrated quarterbacks since entering the league. But it's one of those situations where, Mayfield has potential, but it just hasn't lived up to the hype and everything. But when you look at the talent that the Browns have had the last several years, there's no reason the Browns should have not made it to the Super Bowl. And I know now, looking at the Browns roster right now, I know they released J.C. Treader, they released Austin Hooper, but they still have a really nice roster. But Deshaun Watson is that quarterback that can take you to the next step. I mean, look at Baker Mayfield. In my opinion, I don't even think he's a top 15 quarterback. Deshaun Watson, he's at least top 7. I would say more so a top 5 quarterback. But it's one of those things, it's super, super risky. But if you win a Super Bowl, it's all worth it, in my opinion. And the fully guaranteed contract, obviously that money is insane. But with Watson heading to Cleveland, it's interesting because, there's talks about he could still possibly be, suspended and everything. So you don't know what's going to happen there. But when you look at Watson, it's shocking, honestly. I was talking to my dad. I said, it looks at if Watson is going to go to the Saints, the Panthers, the Falcons. I look at my phone 2 seconds later, he signs with the Browns. I'm so freaking ticked off. I know you're excited, but being a Bengals fan, I don't want to play Deshaun Watson twice a year. When you look at these, rivalries with quarterbacks, Brady and Manning and some of these guys, Burrow and Watson has a nice ring to it, and that could be an amazing quarterback, rivalry for the next 5 to 10 years. But, this came absolutely out of nowhere. Nobody thought it was going to happen, and now all of a sudden Cleveland's giving up 3 first-round picks. Obviously it's going to help them, but it's still super risky because there's a chance he could get suspended. But I think they signed Jacoby Brissett the other day, which is not a bad idea. A guy who isn't great. He's not bad. He's a decent backup, one of the better backups around the league. So if Watson were to be suspended, you could have a guy like Brissett who can play in and not be bad. Honestly, I feel like there's times Brissett is better than Baker Mayfield. So when you look at it, Cleveland, if they win a Super Bowl, they win the trade. But it's one of those situations you just give up so much. It's Super Bowl or bust. And if they don't win a Super Bowl, it was a horrible trade. But if they win a Super Bowl, I feel like this is all worth it. I still cannot believe Watson going to Cleveland because, when we hear these teams, who was involved at the early start, nobody really thought Cleveland. Nobody thought Cleveland towards the end. And then, unfortunately, I know you're excited. He picks Cleveland. Now Cleveland's probably one of the better teams to beat, not just in the AFC, but in the NFL in general.
Man, I am concerned that, I mean, the AFC has become the division, obviously with your guy Burrow. Although I want to point out the sound of Burrow and Trubisky, I think that was a real rivalry you were missing on. That's the Peyton Brady you were missing on. But no, I mean, Russ coming over, you already got Mahomes. Burrow showed what he can do. Allen's already there. At some point, the AFC is going to cannibalize itself. We just have to hope that, like with what the Browns have, that we can push past that. We have the depth. We have every other piece. We were effectively a quarterback away. Now we have that. Obviously, with the suspension potentially looming, they pull Andrew Berry, our GM, pulled a nice move, only having a $1 million salary for this year, or this upcoming year. That way, if he gets suspended, it's not a huge hit, and they can make something happen. So hopefully, if it's at a max 1 year, we're good to go for next year. But we have like a 3-year window, I think, before our Super Bowl, like our odds shut down, especially losing all those first-round picks. I think after that 3-year window, we'll see if we ended up winning this trade or not. Like you said, it results in we have to win a Super Bowl.
And it's one of those things when you look at the AFC North, like when you look at the Ravens, in my opinion, I think the Ravens are extremely overrated. I think they're one of the most overrated teams in the league. You look at the Steelers, I hate to say this. I've been, dogging the Steelers for years and years and years. During heading into the 2020 season, I picked them to be last in the AFC North. I mean, they won the division. I mean, this past season, I didn't think they want to make the playoffs. They made the playoffs with Roethlisberger, who this was probably his worst year ever. And when you have the Bengals, the Steelers are still good. The Bengals are going to be good for a couple of years. I'm not really sold on the Ravens, but it's one of those situations where if the Browns were almost in any other division in the NFL, they would be clear favorites to win the AFC North. And I think they still might, but it's just crazy. Like this AFC North, I've said this for years, is the most underrated division in the NFL. I still think it is, especially when you add Watson to the mix. But it's going to be interesting. If they win that Super Bowl, they clearly end up winning that trade. So when you look at these AFC North teams, and some of these teams have had major upgrades at the Bengals offensive line. Obviously, the Browns, they get Amari Cooper as well, which I think is a nice addition. I would rather have Amari Cooper than Odell Beckham. I'd rather Cooper and Landry. I mean, they're probably similar. So you get both Cooper and Watson. The Steelers get some upgrades as well, the offensive line. You look at, the Ravens. They got Marcus Williams from the Saints. So when you look at this AFC North, both of us being fans of teams in the AFC North, where would you rank these 4 teams, in your opinion, in best to last?
I mean, if we decide to go off this next season, I think you guys have to be standing at that 1 spot. Just off of the success, off of the question marks with the suspension, we don't know what's going to go into it. After that, I would put the Browns. I think the Ravens sit at the 3rd because I do think there are aspects of their game that they are overrated. I think they get bailed out a lot by Lamar for as much hate as he takes. And I think the Steelers are just kind of falling behind. They have a lot of young talent, but they have to get someone under center that's at least competent to push them through. I think that's where I would live with my top 4.
It's interesting because I feel like if Watson, the allegations were gone, and if he played last year, I think it might be different. But the fact, he's had injury issues and he didn't play last year is my only kind of concern for Cleveland when it comes to his play. Obviously, take away the suspension, he's going to be good. But, there is that, small thing at the back of your head. He hasn't played in a year. You don't know how he's going to perform. But I would say the Bengals number 1, Browns number 2. I don't want to say the Steelers 3, but I'm going to have to just because, like, year in, year out, you think they're going to be out of it these past few years, and they still managed, to win the AFC North or go to the playoffs. And, the Steelers were only half a game this past season from winning the AFC North, which is crazy to say because nobody really talks about it. And I don't like talking about it because I don't want to, give this talk good about the Steelers ever. But when you have a guy like Trubisky, everybody, he's the Nickelodeon MVP and everything, the only MVP that really matters. But when you look at Trubisky, I don't know. I feel like he gets a lot of hate sometimes. I'm not saying he's good by any means, but I don't think he's quite as bad as people think. But when you look at Roethlisberger this past season, I think Trubisky can outperform Roethlisberger from this past season. And that's really, honestly, I mean, you don't need a Trubisky playing like an MVP level. If Trubisky can just be average, this Steelers can honestly be a Super Bowl contender with their defense and everything. But with the Ravens, to me, I have never been sold on them from like the start. And it's one of those situations where they can play really, really good one game, and the next game they can play horrible. And you look at this past couple of years, they've got bailed out so many times. I mean, even going back to Monday Night Football against the Colts, the only reason they came back and won that game, the Colts kicker was injured and missed like 2 or 3 field goals. You look back at different times, and just their defense really bails them out. And it's one of the situations where if they're down 10, more likely they're going to lose. If they're up 10, more likely they're going to win, just to where their offense is. I don't think their offense is built for AFC North defenses. I mean, the Steelers have a phenomenal defense. The Browns have a really nice defense. The Bengals have an underrated one. And I'm not really sold on Jackson. So to me, I would probably say the Bengals, Browns, Steelers, and Ravens. But it's one of those situations where, this, in my opinion, I feel like the Ravens are the worst team in AFC North. But they could still possibly even win a division. It's crazy. It just speaks volumes of how highly regarded and how amazing this division is, and really how underrated it is as well.
Yeah, I don't think we get enough love. I mean, obviously, it's easy to look at the AFC West and say, like, yeah, this is the division. But, I mean, top to bottom last year, like you said, the Steelers are only like a half game out or whatever. Like, anything, the amount of flip-flopping that happened for that first place spot in the North last year was, like, I can't even count how many times a different team was up there. It's a tough division. Everyone plays up to each other. And you kind of have to if you want to survive. The Ravens, I agree, are kind of slipping back, but I still think they're better than you're giving them credit for. I think Lamar kept them in a lot more games. Tyler Huntley wasn't bad, but without Lamar for a full season, I think they would fall much further back, which now I think I'm chalking myself into the Ravens being bad. So I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to put a pause on what I'm saying. But I might have ended up just agreeing with your list, honestly.
But it's so crazy because when you look at the AFC North this past season, like we were saying, the Steelers are only half a game out from winning it. The Ravens, Jackson gets hurt. I still don't think that really matters much. But if you put Watson on the Browns team last year, the Browns were, not exceeding expectations. They underperformed big time. But if you put Watson on that team this past season, they probably won a division. If Roethlisberger has any other season in his career, just not last year, they probably won a division. Mm-hmm. And it's just crazy because you have 4 teams who, all 4 of those teams are capable of winning the division. And everybody talks about the AFC West. That's something you can't say with the AFC West. The Raiders traded for Adams. That doesn't really help their case to win the AFC West. I still think they're going to be last. But we'll kind of talk about that later with them getting Davante Adams. But, with talking about the Browns, talking about the AFC North, obviously Cleveland getting Watson and a blockbuster trade nobody thought would happen. Now the answer, and now the question is for Cleveland is what's next for Baker Mayfield. So what do you think happens to Mayfield after the Watson trade?
I mean, that's tough because I figured in my mind the Colts was the best were the best option. Very similar to what the Browns already have, with a good offensive line, a strong, obviously, run attack, and like decent receivers. So that would have been his best chance to at least prove he was something. Now what we're looking at is the Seahawks and the Panthers. I can't imagine the Seahawks. I guess they could waste a late round pick and grab Baker. I thought it was outrageous, the report that came out yesterday that the Browns were shopping him for a first round pick. Beyond the talent aspect, beyond whatever you think about who he is as a player, they had zero leverage once they signed Watson. So I don't understand where they thought that first-round pick was coming from. But back to it, Seattle, I guess, would be fine with some of the rollouts and stuff, but I'm not 100% sold he would have had success there. And I can't see Carolina trading for him. He's not going to save anyone's job. Like everybody in the front office of Carolina knows that they're in the hot seat. There's no reason that they would trade for Baker Mayfield. So his best bet is ending up in Seattle. And I'm not sold on that happening. I think he more likely than not ends up like as a sunken cost for the Browns, and he just gets cut and ends up being a backup somewhere.
The Panthers and the Seahawks are the only 2 teams I can honestly think of, because when you look at these teams who have quarterbacks, like, for example, all these quarterbacks coming to the AFC, like, Dolphins fans love to talk about Tua. But when you start looking at the rosters, Tua is literally the worst starting quarterback in the AFC. And Tua sucks, but I don't think he's quite as bad as people say. But that really shows you how many great quarterbacks are in the AFC right now. But the NFC, I mean, both of those consist of the Seahawks and the Panthers. The Panthers have Darnold. I still think, regardless of the Panthers were to trade for Mayfield, they're still going to draft a quarterback early. Kenny Pickett is somebody to watch out for the Panthers. I think it makes a ton of sense. Maybe even Malik Willis at number 6. But when you look at the Seahawks, to me, I don't know about that one because their offensive line has been horrendous these past several seasons. And it's a big reason why Wilson, decided to leave Seattle. But when you look at the Seahawks, they have Locke, they have draft capital. They have far more draft capital than the Panthers do. So if they wanted to make a move for Mayfield, they easily, beat the Panthers on that. But the Seahawks, to me, I still think Drew Lock has potential. I think he can be good, but it's one of those situations where he could be really good one game, but just suck the other game. He's never really put it all together. And it's one of those deals, like you have Lock, then you have Mayfield. Both of those quarterbacks only have 1 year of the contract left. So odds are you're still going to probably draft a quarterback as well. So let's say you have Kenny Pickett, Baker Mayfield, and Drew Lock on your roster all at once. I mean, you could never have too many good quarterbacks, but at the same time, that has potential to be disaster because when you have Mayfield and Locke both being free agents 1 year from right now, the Panthers, I don't think Mayfield really makes them better. I still think they'll probably be about the same. And it's crazy because we're talking about what's next for Baker Mayfield, a guy who won Cleveland the first playoff game in like 20 years. But now when you look at the, around the NFL, he might not even have a starting job come, this upcoming season, which is crazy to say because he just did not think it would happen. But with all these quarterback moves, I mean, all these teams are getting some really nice quarterbacks fast. And Mayfield, unfortunately for him, is pretty much too late for the party to have his starting job.
It sucks, but it's the reality of the NFL. It's the business part of it. Like, why would you, like you said with the Panthers? I mean, I stand by that he's not saving anyone's job. But on top of that, like you said, what's he guaranteeing? Like, maybe an extra 2 wins. Like, it's not like it's that much of a difference maker that if you make that trade, it's like, whoa, Baker Mayfield's going to burn down the world, like whatever. I think he's just an unfortunate casualty of the business of the NFL.
And it's one of those situations where, like, if your team trades for Watson, which obviously you had the, honor to, get Watson a trade, like, oh my God, we got Deshaun Watson. If so many of your team trades to get Baker Mayfield, your light reaction is like, oh my God, we got Watson. Like, oh God, we got Mayfield. Like, it completely switches. And it's one of those things like if he goes to a team, odds are he can't make that team better. And when you look around the NFL, there's a very, very good chance he's not even better than, the starter. Look at the Dolphins. He might not even be better than their backup. They have Bridgewater. So it's crazy, but I don't know. I feel like the Browns should have just went ahead and traded him before they got Watson. I know that's super risky, but with the, post he had, it made a little bit of sense.
They screwed that whole thing up. If we didn't get Watson, we were SOL. And I mean, I was already planning on it after they said like, the report came out the same day, I think, right? It might have been the day before that the Browns were out on Watson. I was like, all right, let's just look forward. CJ Stroud next year, get a transition quarterback, we'll be fine. Get Mariota. And then it all happened. But in the middle of all of that, we burned a bridge with him because we didn't tell him. Like there's this whole big drama of like he said, she said, he said with the Browns, when in reality they said to him like, hey, the only way we're moving on is if we see this elite quarterback and we have a chance to get him, i.e. Deshaun Watson. They weren't going to make a move for Kirk Cousins. They weren't going to do any of that. But it's just a bad breakup, plain and simple. It was a bad breakup. They should have cut their ties sooner. They could have got way more capital out of it. Now they're looking at maybe a 6th-round pick if they're lucky.
And it's one of those situations where, like, a team's not going to offer a third because they know the Browns are desperate just to get anything in return because it's one of those deals like they know the situation that they're in. They have to get rid of him fast. So you can't have both those quarterbacks on the roster at the same time. And it's just crazy that, I mean, we're having Watson, with Cleveland. You're talking about, the Mayfield and Cleveland dilemma. Another dilemma, with trades, and it's heading into the offseason. Everybody talked about Aaron Rodgers, maybe he can leave the Packers. Obviously, that did not happen. But instead of him leaving, Davante Adams leaves the Packers and kind of shocks everybody as well. He gets traded to the Raiders for a first-round pick, the 22nd pick overall, and a second-round pick, the 53rd pick overall. I do not get this at all. I don't think this helps either team. Okay, yeah, the Raiders get Davante Adams. They sign him to a ridiculous extension. He gets to play with his former quarterback in Fresno State, but they're still the worst team in the AFC West. And if the Raiders were in any other division, I would say except for the AFC North, they would be in the playoffs. But when you have guys like Herbert, Wilson, Mahomes, 3 top 5 or 6 quarterbacks in the NFL just in that one division, and I mean the Chargers have made some monster moves, the Broncos have made some monster moves. When you look at the Raiders, you have Darren Waller, you have Davante Adams, you have Carr. That's an amazing quarterback, wide receiver, tight end trio. They have an okay defense. I mean, we're talking about the Raiders who were in the playoffs this past season, which is still kind of hard to believe with everything that happened. But I still think they're going to be last in the AFC West. It's great for them. I guess to get Adams, but the fact that they traded for a first and second, that's still a lot. As it goes for the Packers, this is so stupid. Like, why would you trade him? Like, I know he said he did not want to play under the franchise tag, so you traded him for a first and second round pick. The Packers, they lost Davante Adams. They did keep Rodgers. They've lost some other people as well. They signed Tanya to a 1-year deal, but they're going to be in the exact same situation 1 year from now. They don't have a true number 1 receiver or even a number 2 receiver. So to me, it's one of those rare instances. I don't think either team won the trade, which is really weird to say because, the Packers got 2 top 55 picks. I don't think they've won it, but the Raiders as well, I don't think they won it because they're still going to suck and they're not going to be good. So I don't know. It'll be interesting. It's another one of those trades that just really shocked people. It came out of nowhere.
I'm going to say it was a little more tilted towards the Raiders than you're giving them credit for. I think this was just a move to keep them competitive. Mike Mayock really screwed them during his tenure. He nailed some of the later picks like Hunter Renfrow, Max Crosby, but what he did in the first couple rounds was just atrocious and set them back. So this is a move to kind of negate those first round, second round picks, and hopefully move forward. They got, was it Ziegler from the Patriots? I think is their GM, who notoriously he does very good work. I want to say he was the guy behind Jimmy Garoppolo, but it might have been Nick Caserio, whatever. I think it was at least a good move to keep them competitive. They have a solid roster. Derek Carr doesn't get enough credit for who he is as a quarterback. Davante Adams at least gives them a weapon beyond Darren Waller. It could have been Henry Ruggs, but obviously we know where that went now. So we'll see. I do still think they finish last or third in the division, just because of how stacked it is. The Chargers fixed so many holes this year. The Chiefs are the Chiefs, barring like a major injury on their part, a couple major injuries, they'll be fine. So I think they still have a lot of work to do, but they're not as far back as we think.
And it's one of those moves. It's like it helps your team, but it's one of those deals. At the same time, you might have just been better off like trading Carr and just rebuilding. Because when you look at the time by Russell Wilson retires, he'll retire probably, 3 or 4 years from now. Justin Herbert's rookie contracts will end in like 3 years. So I would assume that he would re-sign with the Chargers, but you're not totally for sure in today's like era of quarterbacks that we've seen this past couple of weeks. But when you look at that, by the time you get your draft picks, by the time you develop a rookie quarterback, when you start being really good, that's when Wilson's kind of towards the decline of his career. I feel like that might be just better off for them instead of trading, capital right now. Davante Adams is the best wide receiver in the NFL, but he helps the Raiders obviously, but it's hard for me to say like they're still contenders in their division. Like it helps them get better, but it's still not. They might not even make the playoffs, which I think they're capable of being in the playoffs. But it just goes to show, like with all these AFC teams, it's really screwing some of these other teams who are in this past season, like the Raiders and the Steelers. We're seeing people get traded to the AFC, it seems like every single day now. And it's crazy because, the Raiders should be a playoff team, but realistically, they might not be. And it's just kind of crazy that they get Adams and they still might not even be in the postseason.
I do like the combo they did this year, though. Chandler Jones and Max Crosby is going to be fun to watch, especially because Max Crosby is a little slept on because we don't look at pressures as much as we do sacks. But Chandler Jones is a monster, even at his age. Contract was insanely huge. But I think they're doing a lot of good things. They still have a huge gap in their secondary. They haven't really fixed that too much besides Trayvon Moehrig. Beyond that, I have a lot of concerns there, especially with the gunslingers they have in the West. I think they'll sneak into the playoffs. But, I'm going to give that, a 40% chance. I still think they end up in the back of the division.
I mean, it'll be interesting, with the, Raiders, if they go to the postseason this season, and another team, this past season, who did not make the playoffs, but almost did. All they had to do was beat the Jaguars, and they blew it so bad. It is crazy. They did the exact opposite of Mariano Rivera. Mariano closes, they do the complete 180. And, the Colts blew it against the Jaguars in the final game of the season. If they would have won, they went it to the postseason. They did not, obviously. And a couple of weeks ago, they traded Carson Wentz, which to me kind of shocked me a little bit. It was last season, it felt like a match made in heaven. It made so much sense, Carson Wentz going with his, former offense coordinator with Philadelphia. And then after 1 year, he gets traded. I feel like Carson Wentz was bad, but I don't think he was quite as bad as people gave him credit for. But you trade for Matt Ryan. There was talks everywhere these past couple of weeks. Garoppolo always going to the Colts. It makes so much sense. And then with the rumors of Watson going to Cleveland, started to heat up a little bit. Oh, maybe Mayfield goes. And then once Watson officially gets traded, Mayfield's going to go to Indianapolis. And then they take Matt Ryan, who's 37 years old, and trade him to get a third round. They trade a third round pick to get him. You look at Atlanta. Atlanta gets a third round pick by trading Matt Ryan, but they still have to pay $40 million in dead cap space. Matt Ryan has been on your team since 2007. He almost led you to a playoff victory. In my opinion, I don't think this is a horrible move for the Colts, but I feel like this is a far more worse situation handled by the Falcons. In my opinion, if you're going to get rid of Matt Ryan, cut him. In my opinion, he's done so much for your franchise. He's top 10 in passing touchdowns. He's top 10 in passing yards. He's top 5 in passing yards per game. Everything he's done for your franchise. Your franchise has been sucky without him. And you trade him for a probably, not a good third round pick. You could do better than that. Let him, cut him, release him, and let him choose where he wants to go instead of just getting a third round pick who could possibly be bust. If I had to pick a winner in this, I guess it would be the Colts, but Matt Ryan is not going to have many good years of football left. But this is a really, bad, situation by Atlanta. I feel like they could have done a much better job handling this Matt Ryan situation.
I want to talk about a team with holes. Atlanta, everywhere. Receiver, corner, they need someone beside Terrell. And like you said, that third round pick doesn't fix any of that. They might have been better off just letting him go and cutting him. I will say it is good for the Colts, although people kind of point to the easy thing of we're just paying for another old dude who's going to leave in a year or whatever. You're also paying for stability. You traded for stability at the position, which you haven't really had. I mean, Phillip Rivers was fine. Was that 3 years ago, or 2 years ago? But it wasn't great. Carson Wentz last year obviously seemed fine and then just hit a fat cliff. With Matt Ryan, you at least know what you're getting. You know he's stable. You know he's going to be good. He's not going to be great, but he'll at least get you into the playoffs. So that's a good move. I'll give that. But like you said, the Falcons are falling behind. They haven't done a good job drafting. They need way more draft capital and no way to get it. They're a team that's about to be bottom feeding like the Browns were, like the Texans are, and like the Lions are.
And it's crazy because when you look at Atlanta, when you looked at the playoff picture, in week 15, 16 this past season, Atlanta was still in the playoff hunt, which is kind of crazy to say. They had 7 or so wins this past season. And with a first-year head coach and Arthur Smith, and Matt Ryan was inconsistent at times this past season, and the fact that they were in the playoff hunt, Atlanta was much, much, much better than people gave him credit for. So, if you're going to get rid of Ryan, you release him. Or if you want to have Matt Ryan on your team, just have him play, draft a quarterback early, and develop a young quarterback like we've seen in years past, like Alex Smith, start a year, then Mahomes takes over the following year. We've seen that time and time again. Older quarterbacks mentor these young guys. But it's not like this pick was a guy who's going to be a starting quarterback for years to come. It's not like this pick is going to be somebody who's going to have, connection to Atlanta and the guy who's means so much to the Falcons like Matt Ryan. But I don't know. I just hate how the Falcons handled the situation. The Colts, on the other hand, like you were saying, Matt Ryan this past season was good, but he was still inconsistent a little bit. I think he's an upgrade over Carson Wentz. He doesn't have many years left at all. I'm probably like maybe 1 or 2. But I think this move can help them win the AFC South. It's weird because when you look at the Falcons, the Titans, the Titans have quietly been one of the most underrated teams in the NFL for the past several seasons, constantly winning the AFC South. But I think the Colts have enough what it takes now to win the AFC South. And, I mean, they still have a ton of money in cap space. I saw a post the other day. Odell Beckham was talking about how he liked the move with Ryan to the Colts. Maybe they get Odell Beckham and Landry comes with them. So, I mean, all of a sudden, you're looking at the Colts. Right now, I think they're capable of winning the AFC South. You add Beckham maybe to the mix and Landry, I would say I would definitely give, if I had to pick a favorite in the AFC South, it would be the Colts. But I think the Colts won this trade, I guess, because it helps them right now. But the Falcons really just screwed up here. Something else with this pick that's interesting, it's a third-round pick. It's the 82nd pick overall. You reverse 82nd, that's 28, and it's a third-round pick. So in a way, karma still strikes the Falcons again, 28-3, the embarrassing Super Bowl collapse against the Patriots years ago.
Wow. All right. I don't know how you piece that together. Good on you. I will say, as more of my last thought on the whole thing, and I know you're a Florida guy, if the Falcons end up starting Felipe Franks, I'm rioting. I think they would have been much better off because I've comped him to like an athletic Matt Ryan. I think they would have been better off getting Kenny Pickett, letting him develop under Ryan, and then sending him away next year. Obviously, you can't do that now. You can still go for a quarterback, but is Mariota going to be the guy that develops it when he's also competing for a starting job again? Probably not.
And it's interesting, the Falcons signed Mariota to a 2-year deal, and that's something else with the Falcons. Like, in a way, I kind of like this move by the Falcons. Their head coach, Arthur Smith, was the offense coordinator with the Titans while Mariota was with Tennessee. But it's one of those things. I know it's a 2-year deal, and there's a decent chance the Falcons maybe draft a quarterback in the first round and have, him develop under Mariota. But I don't know why you would be that obsessed with Mariota to get rid of Matt Ryan, to replace Ryan with Mariota, have him be the one mentor a quarterback instead of Matt Ryan. Mariota's been a bust. I mean, he was the second pick overall back in 2015. If I'm having a quarterback to mentor a young guy, Matt Ryan, who's a Hall of Famer probably, up for debate, or Mariota, definitely going to take Matt Ryan. Like, I don't get how that's even a possible discussion. I just don't get why the Falcons were so fixated on Mariota. He's probably going to mentor the quarterback. I don't hate the signing, but it just goes back. I don't get why you would just get rid of Matt Ryan. This was a playoff contention team this past season, and you blew it up. You get a quarterback who hasn't proved anything throughout his career. I don't know. I don't really like. I like the signing of the aspect. There's already chemistry between him and Arthur Smith, but I don't like it because Matt Ryan should be the one, mentoring a young quarterback because he's been around the league, been one of the longest tenured quarterbacks in the NFL, up there, with Rodgers. So I don't know. I'm kind of like mixed feelings on this one. So what are your thoughts on Mariota to Atlanta?
I don't know if it necessarily does a crazy amount. I like you said, I think they would have, or like I've said too, but like you would have been better off keeping Ryan there, especially screwing him out of a deal after, like you said, he's been there for so long, like since his time at BC, since he was drafted. He's never wanted to leave. He's never wavered. I don't know if there was any like bad intentions on his side. I don't know if he had any like bad taste in his mouth towards the team. I'm sure there is now. Anyway, back to Mariota. That's a whole other topic. But Mariota's good. He has shown that he can be a good starter, but they're still talking about a low-end guy, and it's not like he's going to be their long-term solution. They didn't sign him to be their long-term solution. That's why he has a 2-year deal. They signed him to be this developmental dude, to be a transition quarterback. It's a fine deal, and they'll kind of stay net neutral. They'll go lower because they actually were fine, I guess, theoretically. But what this is guaranteeing them is a top 5 spot in the draft next year.
like I was saying, chemistry-wise, I like it with him and Arthur Smith. I just don't get why you would not want Matt Ryan mentoring him. And, going back to Matt Ryan and the Colts, Julio Jones got released by the Titans. So we could possibly see, Ryan and Julio reunite with Indianapolis. I would not be surprised if that would happen at all. That's just another case, in my opinion, that would help the Colts end up winning the AFC South. So when we're looking at these teams throughout free agency, there's been so many teams that have, helped their roster. There's been multiple teams who have just absolutely sucked and have, traded away players for no reason, basically kind of like the Falcons and some of the, other teams as well. But, when you look at these teams who have had kind of the best free agency, in your opinion, who are the teams so far who have had the best free agency?
Well, I'm writing the post about it now, but actually Zadarius Smith just signed over with the Vikings, which is a sneaky good pickup. But I'm going to say on that, the Chargers, easily. They knew they had their issue with the run defense. They had a top-tier pass defense, and this made that better with J.C. Jackson. And then they go out and trade for Khalil Mack for what seems like relatively nothing in comparison to the first trade. It's hard to argue against the Chargers. They kept their pieces together that were successful. They've improved on what was there. Give me the Chargers.
Yeah, the Chargers, I would say, are probably towards the top. When you get Khalil Mack for basically nothing, I know it was a second-round pick and a sixth-round pick, but when Khalil Mack, not one of the just best defensive players in the NFL, but one of the best players in general in the NFL, for a second-round pick, you still keep your first-round pick. Like, that's the crazy part to me. Clearly, they won that trade. I mean, and you signed J.C. Jackson for not even a ton of money. I think a little bit less than some people thought. When J.C. Jackson, Khalil Mack, Bosa, you have Derwin James, Kenneth Murray, the linebacker as well from Oklahoma, with Justin Herbert as your quarterback. That's going to be absolutely dangerous. A couple other teams I like here quite a bit. I like the Broncos. For years and years and years, I've been on this Broncos hype train, and I've said they can just get their quarterback. They're going to be amazing. They got Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson's been one of my favorite players probably of all time. It's a match made in heaven for Denver. I feel like they are not just contenders now in the AFC West, but in the NFL to possibly maybe win a Super Bowl. I like the Texans. I mean, they got rid of Watson when they could, and they got 3 first-round picks for it. I think that was great for them. And I'm not going to be biased. I like the Bengals quite a bit too, getting 3 new stars in the offensive line. I feel like those are some of the winners so far in free agency. I know several other teams, but I feel like all those teams really helped their case to improve their roster a lot.
I'm going to say, I mean, if you guys get Lyle Collins too, like that'll just be game over.
We signed Collins yesterday.
Cool. Missed that. All right. W. So move you guys up in that conversation. Yeah, I mean, of all those teams, like you can't really see many flaws. They did what they had to do. Like you said, the Broncos were a quarterback away. They got their dude. Chargers obviously fixed their holes, and you guys are protecting your best asset. I will say sneaky, if we're going to talk about that, the Jaguars, although people are like hyper focused in on how much they're spending, have done a phenomenal job in free agency because they understand that to get people into Jacksonville, you have to pay. They're not drawing people there like a winning culture. Trevor Lawrence doesn't have that draw yet. They just have an average team that they're trying to build. And if they want to get those people there, you're going to have to pay Christian Kirk a lot of money. You're going to have to pay Evan Ingram weird amount of money to be a tight end. Like, you have to set these big contracts if you want people as a part of this rebuild. It's unfortunate. It's how the league works, though. So good on them.
They're one of those teams. I completely agree with what you're saying, but it's one of those deals. All right, you have this rich guy. Let's see how much, you have too much money to spend, so you just spend it on stupid stuff. Like Christian Kirk, $18 million. Like, that is stupid and ridiculous. That should never happen. But I do agree with you. Like, when you have a small market team who has sucked for so many years, there has to be a reason for some guy who's coming from a different team to want to play for that team. And clearly it's about the money for Christian Kirk, who I thought he was going to get 8, but instead he gets 18. But when you're a small market team, when you see a team like Cleveland, when you see a team like Detroit or Jacksonville, some of these teams who are not top market teams, when you overpay somebody, that's how you get them in your franchise. So I know what you mean on that, and I get why the Jacksonville Jaguars did that, but I still think they kind of overdid it a little bit there. But the Jaguars is a team I'm kind of interested in for next season. Also a team like the Jets. I'm not going to say they're a winner, but I like some of their moves. Shockingly, they signed C.J. Uzomah. Shocked some people there. I really thought he was going to stay in Cincinnati. Laken Tomlinson, I freaking love that move coming from the 49ers. Already has chemistry with lots of the staff coming from San Francisco. Zach Wilson, I think it's going to be fun to watch this season with the Jets. But when we start, talking about some of these teams who've kind of had a bad free agency, some of the teams who've had the worst free agency, who are some of the teams you're going to mention here?
Oh, man. My co-host with the Boston bias are going to hate this, but it's New England. They've brought back a couple veterans. Cool. Fine. They missed out on Leonard Fournette, which didn't really make sense why they were pursuing him, but they did. And then they didn't address getting – obviously they can still do this in the draft, but they didn't address getting Mac Jones an elite weapon. They could have got Allen Robinson. They could have got Christian Kirk, I guess, if you thought he was that dude. There are so many options, and they have done nothing. They have been very average. And then trading one of the best guards for a fifth-round pick to the Bucs. That blows me away. And he's only 28, too. A lot of weird choices. I don't understand a lot of them. I know not paying J.C. Jackson's obviously going to be the shining example of why when you're talking about the Patriots. I think they are by far and away the biggest loser of free agency.
And when you look at it, they had really no intentions of even discussing a possible extension or re-sign with J.C. Jackson, which makes zero sense because that's kind of like the same situation we've seen this past year with Stephon Gilmore. Like when you look at Gilmore, who at the time just a year or two ago was one of the best corners, look at J.C. Jackson, who's probably been the best corner these past couple of years, and you have no intention to sign those guys. That makes no sense. And you didn't get those top marquee guys that you're mentioning. You let go of that Ted Carris, the center, left guard, right guard, who signed with Cincinnati. He can play any of those three interior offensive line positions. He played mainly left guard this past season, but he'll play center for the Bengals. It doesn't make sense. Lots of people thought he was going to re-sign with New England. I didn't even have him on my list because, for sure, he's one of those, guys probably ends up re-signing with the Patriots, being great. The Patriots are one of those teams, I would agree, have had a bad free agency. Another team, when you look at, I think the Cowboys have to be up there. They gave the Browns Amari Cooper for loose change in your pocket, 2 cents basically, and a paper clip, whatever's in your pocket, just give it to him. But it's that was a horrible trade. Their intentions were they're going to trade Amari Cooper to retain Michael Gallup and Cedric Wilson Jr. I do love the Michael Gallup signing. I have no idea how they got him so cheap. That makes zero sense. I'm still trying to figure it out. $13 million for a arguably top 13 receiver in the league. It's crazy. Mm-hmm. Cedric Wilson Jr. to me heading into free agency was probably my most underrated free agent. I was really keeping an eye on, but they didn't keep him. He ended up signing with Miami, and they released Leo Collins, who went to Cincinnati. Look at this Cowboys team who. Midpoint of this past season, people are going to say, oh, they're a Super Bowl team. They took a deep dive into a pool and completely crapped their pants. They so much pressure on them, they were horrible. And when you look at the Cowboys now, I might sound crazy. I don't even think they're locks to win their division anymore. The fact that they're so inconsistent. They lost Collins, they lost Wilson, Cooper. I think they might have lost somebody else. I just can't remember. And another team here is probably the Packers. I know they re-signed Tanya to a 1-year deal. You're going to be in the same situation 1 year from now. I know you got a first and second for Davante Adams, but the window. I know Aaron Rodgers re-signed, but the window for Rodgers' success in Green Bay is still not that long. So I don't know why you would trade Davante Adams if you draft a wide receiver with one of your 2 first or 2 seconds. You're going to have more than likely at least a year for him to fully develop. So that's kind of taking a year off Rodgers' first year coming back with Green Bay. You said they lost Demarius Smith to the Vikings, which really up until that point, before you mentioned it, I was going to say the Vikings probably one of the worst teams. But since they signed him, well, I'm not going to say them. But I'm kind of surprised the Packers. They're trying to get Valdez-Scantling back, but he might not return. The Cowboys and the Patriots, in my opinion, are probably some of the teams who have had the worst free agency so far.
The thing with the Davante Adams trade that I didn't mention too, and if you're tying this back into their free agencies, they got that draft return, sure, but there's no Jamar Chase in this draft. There might be somebody might develop into that, sure, but off the gun, off of just pre-evaluations, no one's at that caliber. Not to toot your horn, but you don't get rid of Davante Adams, despite the fact he didn't want to stay, whatever. But you don't get rid of a dude like that if you don't see someone else in the draft that you're like, yes, this is the guy we need to get. This is the guy who's going to fill that wide receiver 1 hole. I can't see it. I can't see anybody that they're going to fill with that. So that is a sneaky good pick I didn't think of. The Cowboys kind of confuse me. Like you said, they've spent their money in weird ways, and especially when you're probably looking at Dan Quinn at least being out next year and maybe even more. Both of them leaving, like that's just going to hurt their whole window. Like the window is going to slam shut. I think it might have ended already last year, but we're going to see.
And you mentioned Dan Quinn might leave, their current defense coordinator. Depending how the season goes, like I said, I wouldn't be shocked if they don't even win the NFC East. I think there's a small chance Sean Payton might be their head coach next season. I know I might sound kind of crazy on that, but he's had, ties with Dallas. I think it kind of makes some sense. Mike McCarthy has already shown at times with Dallas, he's kind of holds his team back, which is something, we kind of saw with Green Bay with Rodgers. He has a great roster, but the coaching staff holds the team back. But it'll be really interesting. I mean, there's been so many teams who have had a good free agency. So many teams got better, like the Bengals, the Browns, Chargers. There's so many teams that got worse, like we talked about, the Packers, Cowboys, Patriots, a couple other teams as well. We kind of talked about, Mariota signing with the Falcons due to Matt Ryan getting traded to the Colts, Davante Adams getting traded to the Raiders, and your Cleveland Browns trading to get Deshaun Watson, shocking the NFL, coming out of absolutely nowhere. And that really kind of about, does it for this video. So, James, can you kind of tell some of the listeners where they can follow you on social media and everything?
Yeah, I mean, first off, thank you again for having me. You can find my stuff everywhere at Boda Sports. That's Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube as well, although we don't really do too much there. And you can find all of our podcasts by searching Boda Sports as well.
I'll definitely put the links in the description below so people can check out your content. If you're new to the channel, or if you've seen my videos before, make sure to follow me on Instagram and Twitter, the Sports Dude Hines Show on Instagram, and S Dude Hines Show on Twitter. Make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. I would really, really appreciate it. See you all next time on Sports Dude Hines Show.